once you start fasting and intermittent fasting or eating a low carb diet, you start to become curious. Like, okay, well, what is my glucose? That belief that I've always been fat, I will always be fat. And if I have all these failures with these different dietary strategies, it's just like, well, I must be broken. If you could encapsulate the benefits of a sauna into a pill, it would be the best-selling drug there is.
What have you been up to?
You know what? I mean, a lot of different things, but yeah, we can talk about the lipopolysaccharide. I think that's interesting because that was kind of this purported mechanism by which eating processed food, especially highly processed carbs and fats together, kind of causes this chronic low-grade inflammation that's characteristic of obesity and metabolic disease. But it's interesting that research has been kind of quiet. So I wanted to ask you, like, have you been following that story? Because this guy, Patrice Canny out of Belgium or Brussels, really kind of pioneered that. And then it sort of went dark. I haven't heard much about it. And we hear more now about Faecobacterium prausnitzii and Akkermansia muciniphila and these kind of, these keystone species that help stabilize the diversity and therefore the stability of the ecosystem. But yeah, that LPS research is kind of interesting. And I don't know, I just got so infatuated with it. I wrote a book about it and all that, but in like the last 3 years, I haven't heard anything about it. So I don't know.
Yeah. What is lipopolysaccharide for listeners who are hearing that? I mean, that's a mouthful.
Right.
But in a nutshell, what is that?
Yeah. So in short, it's LPS. So this is an appendage. So if you think about a dog, a dog has a tail. There's different tail lengths. All bacteria have these different appendages, and gram-negative bacteria, which is one way to characterize our cell membrane, have this lipopolysaccharide appendage. And that tends to really ignite our innate immune system. So when that comes across our selectively permeable, one cell thick, endothelial layer in the gut, epithelial layer, that ignites our innate immune system. And this is a problem in many different chronic diseases, is chronic low-grade inflammation. We see it now. It's talked about in the media a lot with regards to susceptibility to COVID, because the more chronically inflamed you are, the more stimulated this innate immune system is, the more sort of susceptible you are to chronic inflammatory diseases or acute infections. So yeah, LPS, and it's used in various studies too, to actually induce depression, to induce mild cognitive impairment and memory loss. And that feeling of like when you feel sick, part of that is the common cold from, more porous barriers and the ensuing innate immune system activation. So different cytokines, these are kind of chemical messengers. I'm sure you've talked about these on the show, but things like TNF alpha and interleukin 6 are demonstrably increased right after LPS, whether you get it, because we all have LPS in our guts, about 5 grams, enough to kill us. And so if we were to get stabbed in our small intestine, we would get sepsis and die.
Right.
But so that's the extreme end of this spectrum. But a lot of people are sort of on the other side and getting low grade sepsis by going to McDonald's, by buying processed food, right? So if you eat something with a lot of processed carbs and processed fats together, think of all the bad foods. I like pizza too, but right, like pizza, and they do studies with this, French fries, donuts. You think about all these things, carbs and fats together is a recipe to induce this low-grade sepsis, which causes people to feel crappy and exacerbate chronic inflammation. So,
but these are the kinds of foods that people are eating all the time,
and they're inflamed, man.
60% of the calories that your average American consumes on a daily basis comes from fast food, pizza, frozen dinners, things like that.
Right. Bread, cookies,
cookies,
muffins.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So it's frightening to think about, but it's not just food too, alcohol. As much as I think you and I both share an affinity for red wine. I love red wine, but that feeling of having a hangover is actually endotoxemia, low-grade endotoxemia.
Wow.
There was, imagine being a student there was one study where they recruited college kids and said, okay, have 3 to 5 shots in a short period of time. And they measured blood alcohol levels. And it was parallel. The increase in blood alcohol paralleled the levels of gram-negative bacteria in their bloodstream. And then there was a subsequent inflammatory response. So you think like, there's these anti-hangover remedies that are like taurine and, electrolytes. It's also inflammatory. So if, that feeling where we've all drinking too much, most people listening have, you just feel like crap. You can't think, you can't process. That is actually that's inflammation partly from the ethanol poisoning and acetaldehyde and all that, but also from endotoxin. So,
wow. Is there a safe way to drink? Like, is there anything that you can drink concurrently with the alcohol or eat, with the alcohol so that you don't
get that so much? I think red wine, because this is where the polyphenols kind of come in. And I know these are contested, right? Because if you talk to anyone, and I like the carnivore diet too, but people will say polyphenols don't do anything. They're not necessary, but they help mitigate this endotoxemia. So I'm partial to red wine personally, but I think if you just binge drink, it comes with the territory, right? So if you're going to binge drink, then prioritize gut health. Maybe take some probiotics, maybe take some L-glutamine when you get home, some glutathione, things like that. But if you're feeling really buzzed, just know that you're going to pay the price. Maybe you can exercise or go for a walk, the next day, maybe go in the sauna, things like that to just sort of quell that inflammation.
Have you ever tried liposomal glutathione?
I have.
Yeah.
Stuff works, man.
It maybe it works, but it definitely it wakes you up because of the smell and the taste. It's a very pungent. It's got a very pungent,
Sulfury.
sulfury kind
Yeah.
of smell. And
That's
taste.
interesting. I mean, glutathione's pretty fascinating. And just NAC, there's some good research on that. It's really affordable. A couple grams, you can do pretty well with that.
Yeah. NAC is what? The precursor to glutathione, correct?
Yeah, N-acetylcysteine. So it's just an amino acid, but the glutathione tripeptide is glutamine, glycine, and cysteine. So, and the rate limiting steps in making glutathione is the cysteine moiety. So that's why sulfur containing foods, if you think garlic, onions, things like that, they can help facilitate glutathione production.
Yeah,
So,
I love that. And glutathione, the mother of all antioxidants, your body's master detoxifier. You make it in your own body.
right.
But there probably are some indications, and I'm sure you know better than I, that might warrant inclusion of exogenous supplemental glutathione in your diet.
Yeah. I mean, just things like we're here in LA. If we were to, I don't want to discourage outdoor activity whatsoever, but people that run near freeways, it's a stress and a burden due to diesel fume exhaust and all of these different chemicals in the environment. So if you can, and again, I don't want to discourage people because I love exercise and it's so beneficial for many physiologic functions, but exercising near a freeway, for example, will deplete glutathione. Excessive alcohol consumption, things like that. There's genetic testing you can do to look at the rate limiting steps and glutathione S transferase and these different enzymes that you can do. Seeking Health offers a good one. So you can check that out. And it's called the Strategene test.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So yeah, but a simple test actually. Have you reviewed labs on your podcast before and kind of talked about blood work?
My own? No, never.
No.
I'd be interested in doing that though.
That'd be kind of cool. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, one simple test that a lot of people can do or go back and look at their blood work last time they had it. It's part of the so-called liver function tests, LFTs. So there's AST, ALT, and GGT. So GGT is the rate limiting step that kind of helps with that. We talked about liposomal glutathione and N-acetylcysteine, which is the amino acid cysteine. GGT helps catalyze that cysteine moiety on to make glutathione. So when that starts to creep up, it's a surrogate sort of proxy to suggest that, hey, your body, it doesn't mean you're deficient. It just means that you have increased demand for glutathione. So you have to figure out what is that? Is that mold? Is that heavy metals? Is that cadmium, unfiltered water, or like we talked about air pollution, things like that. So, and a lot of doctors actually don't even run GGT because they're taught in their training, oh, if you're not an alcoholic, we don't need to run this. But GGT is a really, really important. There's been a lot of different scientists all throughout the world that have found this correlates with total body heavy metal accumulation, persistent organic pollutants, all the flame retardants that are in our couches, bedding, pillows, and all that stuff, and clothing. So yeah, it's an important thing, and I think an affordable way for people to surrogately see, hey, should I be investing $40 in liposomal glutathione? Do I need NAC? A lot of people, though, they have liver enzymes that are increasing.
Very interesting. I had a headache the other day that I just couldn't shake. I was like, downing turmeric capsules and fish oil and all the things that I knew had an anti-inflammatory effect, but it just wouldn't go away. So I ended up popping some acetaminophen, which I rarely do. I rarely, I've got to be in pretty severe pain for me to, or it's got to be
warranted.
Yeah, for me to like reach for a pharmaceutical, typically it's got to be warranted. Like I'm very hesitant to, and of course no stigma on people who require them, but just for me generally for like a headache, I wouldn't typically bother, using an over the counter drug. But I took an acetaminophen, and because of course I know that acetaminophen depletes liver glutathione, I then took a packet of the liposomal glutathione. I have no idea to what degree the dose of acetaminophen that I took would do that to me, but just to sort of like buy myself added insurance.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's scary how many people take Tylenol and don't think about that. They drink with Tylenol, but it's really, really bad.
Yeah.
I don't know the molecular mechanisms as to why, but it is pretty hepatotoxic.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a good, like if you need to take Tylenol for whatever reason, you definitely should take NAC or glutathione for sure.
Well, the issue with acetaminophen is that if I recall correctly, the therapeutic dose and the toxic dose are are actually pretty close together, like dangerously close together. And acetaminophen overdoses are actually a significant cause of people visiting the emergency room. And so, yeah, it is definitely a drug that you want to be careful with.
Cautious of.
Yeah.
But it's funny. It's like some of our friends that aren't as in tune with natural health, like they pop these things all the time. Like I go skiing everywhere with some friends who are all physicians, by the way. And at the end of the ski day, they're popping Tylenol and ibuprofen, and I'm like, and they're drinking, and I'm like, I'm not going to say any names, but I'm like, you guys, like this, you shouldn't be doing this. Like, even if it's an NSAID, like say ibuprofen or Advil, things like that, like those are challenging for the GI barrier, right? Those induce intestinal permeability, low grade sepsis, like we were just talking about with LPS. So yeah, and all these things are around exercise because people are like, oh, you just take them after skiing, your legs are sore, but you're sort of blunting that post-exercise response, and you're going to be maybe worse the next day or not recovered. But it's amazing, and I feel for these people, and I just don't know, is it an education issue? Is it an awareness issue where they don't understand that this connection between sort of over-the-counter medicines and harming our health? Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. Well, this is your first time on my show, which is kind of mind blowing because we've been friends for such a long time, and I've been an admirer of your work. But for listeners who are not familiar with you and your backstory, let's go into that a little bit.
Sure.
So, yeah, what's your educational background? I know you've got advanced like credentials and stuff, which I don't have, but yeah, I appreciate those, and also like what are the kinds of things that you like to focus on with high intensity health?
Sure. Yeah. Great question. So I have a bachelor's degree in biology, and I wanted to go to med school, but I didn't believe in myself. Like when I was going through, like before undergrad, not to get too back into all this, like I didn't pay attention in school at all. I was into cars and motorcycles and all that. So I loved to figure out how things work. And then once school started clicking in college, I wanted to know how the body works. So that's just kind of where I come from. But yeah, it's interesting. I just love building things and all that. Like I built a sauna. We can talk about that later. A traditional Finnish sauna with a wood fired stove that gets up to like 230 degrees. But anyway, then I went on and got a master's degree in nutrition, and I started selling supplements to doctors. So a lot of people don't realize that there's this practitioner channel that's $1 billion annual industry. Whereas, for compounding pharmacists, for example, that sell bioidentical hormones, or integrative or holistic or functionally medicine oriented medical doctors, they sell supplements. So I started working when I didn't know what the hell I was talking about at age 24 after I got my bachelor's degree. So that's where I learned a lot of stuff, is just like literally having customers, doctors that are customers doing really cool stuff, taught me lab work and different things. And so that's where it came from. And then I started high intensity health because I realized that as great as doctors are at working with patients, they kind of suck at marketing. And I was like, if I bring you on my show and I can market you better than you can market you, with all due respect, then you will be a better customer of mine. And that's kind of how it started, actually, which is kind of crazy.
Smart.
And then I just, I just love these conversations like we're having right here, and people need them because they get like 10 minutes with their primary care doc nowadays, unfortunately. So anyway, that's how it started. But so keto, fasting, autophagy, sauna, anything regarding immune health. So that's what we share on our channel.
Sometimes I see you online butting heads with the fitness community, which it's kind of funny because we're definitely into fitness, but there's like a whole community that I think is somewhat at odds with like the more longevity focused, holistic health focused philosophy that guides. I think that primarily is what guide our work,
right?
But yeah, like the calories in, calories out, like I call them calorie zealots, like those kinds of guys. And you kind of butt heads with them. What's that? What is that about?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, like you said, there's kind of, I think it's a mindset. The book Mindset by Carol Dweck from Stanford. Have you heard about that? So you have people that have an open mindset, whereas they're open to new ideas and learning information and challenging their own beliefs. And I think you and I do a good job of that. We all have biases. I mean, that's just part of being human. But then you have people who, and if you look at their training, so in school, I mean, we're taught, fat loss it's a very simple mathematical calculation. But what the backstory, or what you're not really taught about, is adaptive thermogenesis. So if you and I go on an intermittent fast or a prolonged fast, we know energy. our metabolism is going to slow down. Like thyroid hormone, adrenaline, noradrenaline will decrease. So our resting metabolic rate is going to change. And that happens in the short acute term situation. If we fast or we cut calories, or if we go on a 12-week low calorie diet, like our metabolism will change. And so you have these people that are constantly, lowering their calories, they're over exercising, and now they have like 800 calories a day and they're gaining weight. They're like, what the hell is going on? So a lot of people that have degrees in in nutritional sciences, dietetics, things like that, they're sort of it's indelibly inked in their thought processes because they're professors and this professor, the conference and all of that. It's really geared towards this energy balance model of obesity. And they sort of make fun of people like you and I who believe in hormones and the idea that if you and I eat the same foods we've been eating and someone gives us exogenous insulin or corticosteroids, we will gain weight, right? It's not like we are repartitioning. Those hormones will redirect where that energy is being stored. And so they kind of make fun of people like you and us and call us like, ketards for liking ketogenic diets or things like that. So I don't know. I don't know how it started online on Instagram and everything. And I kind of have backed out of that a little bit, but yeah, there is definitely two schools of thought. And I think like anything in life, like some of the calories obviously matter, right? We can't eat 7,000 calories a day and not exercise and lose weight, right?
Yeah, and you can gain weight on a ketogenic diet if you're consuming more calories than you're burning every day, right? The calories outside of the equation.
A lot of people do because they think, oh, it's keto. So there's this natural sort of human fallacy. So if I tell you that these cookies are gluten-free and organic, guess what? You're going to eat more of them unless, if you, the two, and studies have actually looked at this, University of Michigan, when we label something as keto or paleo or gluten-free, we eat more, right? Because we make this concession that, oh, this food, it doesn't count as much, or I already exercised today or things like that. So I can understand where people are coming with that. But there's a happy medium here between what's going on metabolically, hormonally. And I've seen many, physician friends, for example, that have gone on a medication for, whether it's psoriasis or rosacea or whatever, gain weight due to the hormonal changes of that medication. But yeah, there's this happy medium. But what I've found is a lot of people in this mainstream nutrition research, they generally appeal to authority a lot.
Mhm.
And they refer to, well, this meta-analysis showed. Now, a lot of these studies, tracking exactly how much people eat in a given day, unless you're in, a tank, not, where they account for every little movement and every little, crumb that you eat, it's hard to sort of do these real world studies. And that's why I think what we see in the real world, where people say, I start intermittent fasting, I cut out my carbs and I lose weight. You see that a lot. And those people don't always count calories. They're just eating less processed crap. So anyway, I think there's a happy balance between the two, but yeah, it is contentious. People in the calorie camp don't like people that talk about their hormonal model and the sort of insulin glucose mediated obesity model.
Yeah, I think the problem is that what people like us like to do is to offer strategies to real people. And of course, strategies are, we write books about them, we make Instagram posts about them. I think the fallacy is that these calorie zealots, as I like to refer to them, they make the mistake of assuming that calories in, calories out is a strategy, and it's not a strategy. It's not. It's like it's as much of a strategy to weight loss as saying to get rich, earn more than you spend every month, and that's not a strategy. That's like the mathematical truth, and I'm not refuting that. So that's why I don't necessarily disagree with the people who tend to focus more on calories. It's just that I think they're putting their focus on the wrong place,
People need more guidance, right?
Because they need more guidance.
What I see, because I followed all sorts of people on social, right? And you get to see sort of with Instagram stories, what they're doing behind the scenes in their groceries, and people that sort of follow these calories sort of thing, macros, they think that they can afford the 400 calorie muffin or the whatever. So it creates this weird mindset where, I haven't hit my target of macros today, so therefore I'm going to go get a donut, go get a Twinkie or whatever. And I think that's just like you said, it's not really a good strategy. And whereas if you just make some, and I think the 80-20 principle is great. When it comes, like you can still have a donut periodically, but it's every single day because it affords your macros. I don't think that's a long-term solution for health, right? And And the other challenge with some of those calorie zealots is they sort of assume because you have a low body fat that therefore you're also healthy.
Mm.
Whereas where our message is like, okay, low body fat and muscle tone it's just it's a proxy. Like it is good, but that's just one piece of the puzzle. What about chronologic age versus biologic age? And we can talk about telomeres and, Horvath clocks and things like that. So that's the other part of it. Whereas people that focus on looking at their labs, maybe start fasting, things like that, they're not only improving their body composition, but they're improving their health, which would reduce risk of disease or optimize their brain functioning, things like that.
Yeah. And to their credit, there are probably people, and I guess I'm not familiar with them, but there probably are people in the keto space that are highly dogmatic, that probably do at times imply that calories don't matter as long as you're on a ketogenic diet.
Yeah. And say egregious things.
Yeah. And say egregious things. So there's that too.
Right.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I really appreciate about you, and which is what I also try to embody in my work, is a message of balance and reason and practicality. You don't have to be on a low carb diet. You can be on a low fat diet. Mm-hmm. But the problem with that, in my view, is that what low fat means in the United States of America is the Snackwell's diet. It's low fat, uber processed grain products with the red Heart Healthy logo on them. And so I think that's just that can be a recipe for disaster. I think it's a lot easier and more practical. And this might be my bias coming out, right? But from my own personal experience and the experience, from those that I've interacted with who have also, told me that it works for them. And of course, the thousands of messages that over time, having put out a book and, the book has gone out, to the corners of the world, I get messages from people. So I'm not a clinician, but I do have that kind of experience where, it's worked for others out there that say that when they eat low carb, they're able to cut out, pretty nutrient poor foods, energy rich foods, and they focus on real fat containing whole foods, and that it checks all the other boxes of being just generally good for your health as well.
And it's more satiating.
Yeah.
It's hard. Like if you're eating avocados, nuts, eggs, you put a little butter in your coffee, like you're just not snacking, like you're full. And that's what I think is nice, especially with so many people working from home right now. The refrigerator is just like 2 steps away for a lot of people, right? And we've seen the data now coming out with lockdowns and all that. A lot of people gained weight, and the overweight and the obese gained more weight than the people who weren't overweight and obese.
Oof.
Studies have shown that, right? So that's, for me, like you said, you can do low fat for sure. Like you can do vegan, you can figure out healthy ways to construct your eating program and for the most part hit your health goals and body composition goals. But there's, I think, additional benefits to, say, doing it low carb. And again, that's probably my bias coming out, but cognitively preserving the brain. We know that ketones, like you talked about many times, and the studies have shown, this really help prevent mild cognitive impairment and age-related, cognitive decline from the energetic standpoint. And I think from a longevity standpoint too, and it lends itself to making fasting easier. So if you're on a low fat diet, good luck fasting. Like that's just my personal experience. And I've heard that from many people. Is they're like, if I go without food for more than 12 hours, like I start to shake, I need food. I'm like hangry. Whereas you or I, like yesterday, I basically didn't eat anything until, 7 PM, right? And I was fine. Like I was on an airplane talking to people with my daughter, like, it wasn't a wreck. Whereas 10 years ago, I couldn't have done that when I was, eating more of kind of a low carb, high protein bodybuilding style diet.
There was that study that just came out. Did you catch it? Where it found that glycemic dips, postprandial glycemic dips, were correlated to increased calorie consumption throughout the day, which is which I think offers a rationale to minimize glycemic variability in your diet. Again, this doesn't refute calories in, calories out, but it does provide a rationale that suggests, that eating high carb, irrespective of calories, might actually cause us to eat more calories.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't see that. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense.
It just came out over the past week, and it's also important to say that people have differing glycemic, even people that are metabolically healthy have differing glycemic responses to a given food, right? There was that microbiome study a couple of years ago that found that white bread, or I forget what it was, bananas or something like that, in 2 healthy people, depending on their gut microbiota composition, had completely different glycemic responses with the same bolus of carbohydrate.
Isn't that fascinating?
It's so interesting, yeah.
Even with lean versus obese twins, like similar foods will cause different changes based upon, how, diverse or lack of diversity they have in their microbiome from, say, antibiotic use or breastfeeding duration. There were several studies on that, but
Hmm.
that to me is fascinating. And you bring up a great, talking about glycemic variability. I don't see anyone in the seco space, like you call them calorie zealots, talking about looking at post meal glucose, talking about measuring ketones or anything like that. Whereas once you start fasting and intermittent fasting or eating a low carb diet, you start to become curious, like, okay, well, what is my glucose, and continuous glucose monitor utilization, which is now, a lot of people have access to this with Levels or
Yeah.
NutriSense. I mean, there's so many different tools. So it opens up your door to really sort of personalizing your diet. And that's what you hit on, it's not really prescriptive, like, okay, just eat less calories than you burn. You're like, okay, well, how can I personalize it more? Like, what if that doesn't work? Or what if that stops working? Because our metabolism today, in April probably will change seasonally. Like it's going to be different in the fall. Animals model studies have shown that, like with bears, they start to, accumulate more body fat, and hormonally things shift. So I think that's just another thing to consider.
Well, because I think that when that advice falls on the ears of somebody who's consuming the standard American diet to just that it's all just about calories in, calories out, and to just moderate your portions, they're going to moderate their portions. They're going to moderate what they're already eating. They're going to eat smaller portions of what they're already eating. And what they're already eating is 60% ultra processed foods. And so what that is to me is just a recipe for hunger and misery.
Yeah.
Right. I've done posts on Instagram, which I'm sure you've seen, where I'm comparing the calorie density of ultra processed foods versus high volume whole foods. And so if you're a fitness influencer and you're just saying to mind your calories, and that advice falls on the ears of somebody, who's just eating fast food all day long, and they're gonna fail, and they're gonna have that sort of moral, that sense of moral failure that they couldn't do it. Maybe that they're destined to be overweight for life, and I think it just does a lot of harm, and it's a huge disservice to people. Now, if you're an obsessive fitness junkie, then count your calories.
Right.
Use one of those apps or a Google Docs spreadsheet or whatever to like. And so there's obviously a demographic for whom that works. Bodybuilders, I'm sure like if you wanted to get to 4% body fat, tracking would be maybe somewhat helpful. Yeah. But I don't think that's a goal for your average person. The goal for your average person who is overweight is to just get down to a healthy weight.
Which they don't really understand, like you said, beyond the calorie counting and all that. But I think you hit on something great, is that belief that I've always been fat, I will always be fat. And if I have all these failures with these different dietary strategies, it's just like, well, I must be broken. And so I just need to accept this reality that like, well, my parents were overweight, all my friends are, so I just must be like this. And then you start to believe in that determinism, which I think is a scary place to come from. And the body's so malleable, right? I mean, you have people that have had horrific injuries that have recovered from that. If you look at Drew Manning, have you followed his work? Like he's gained weight on purpose.
Fat to fit or fit to fat to fit. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
He did that twice now.
Wow.
And so, he has the history of like being metabolically healthy and then going unhealthy, where he just stopped exercising and ate crap. But he wanted to do it to show people like, hey, this is possible. Like the body really, responds to change. So I think to me, it's fascinating. But anything you do in life where you get failure, I think sucks, because then you lose motivation, and you need to sort of get these small wins, like you and I over the years of like becoming more healthy, because I ate processed crab growing up. I'm sure you did too. You start with these small little steps, and it's iterative. You get more and more progress. And that's why I think things like exercise, like fasting, and then pairing these things together, it's not just additive, it's additional, so I think it's interesting to sort of open your mind up to beyond just the calories.
Yeah, it's such an important conversation to be had. I'm glad we're talking about it. You've recently been really into saunas. Yeah, which I love. I'm a huge sauna fanatic, so really excited to talk to you about saunas. What's your regimen look like?
Yeah, well, I mean, it started because so I started to get into sauna therapy in 2013 because there's one at our gym in Seattle. And when gyms closed and then reopened and all that sort of stuff, they didn't reopen the sauna. And I've been wanting to build my own sauna. And we've had an infrared sauna too. Maybe we can talk about the different types. But I'll just give you the big picture here. So I've been doing it for, almost 8 years now. And I just got used to it. And then when the gyms closed, I got really frustrated because we have this infrared sauna made by this company, High Tech Health. I know there's all these different brands. The infrared sauna, I think a lot of people have this perception that it's somehow better than, say, the sauna that you or I have. But really, the mechanism of sauna therapy is the heat. Like this, what makes this room different from a sauna is there's no heater, right? So really, that's the mechanism of action, and the adaptive response that you get when you're in the sauna from a cardiovascular standpoint, from a detoxification standpoint, is heat mediated. So, I like to tell people, get the sauna that you can afford. Like if you have a small 1-bedroom condo, like you're not going to have a classic Finnish sauna. Sorry, like you get a small infrared sauna, but just realize that to get your body hot enough, you're gonna have to stay in longer. So the infrared sauna that we had, I loved using it. My wife and I would go in there, but it only got up to like 160 degrees, which after having years of going in the sauna in our gym, it just wasn't enough. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna build my own. I want it to be like the most badass sauna that people have been in, because it's part of life. Like in Nordic countries, in Scandinavian countries, and also in Russia, right? Like this is like kids are born in the sauna. When people die, they clean the bodies in the sauna, like in Finland. So this is just part of life. And what's cool about the sauna, and what's cool about getting a sauna, and you've experienced this, is it's something to do alcohol-free or drug-free with other people. It's like, hey, come over, let's do a sauna. And you're there, you're kind of vulnerable, a towel wrapped around you, maybe a swimsuit, and you can have these cool conversations. And so that's what inspired me to build the sauna. But most importantly, the reason why I think everyone should get one is the health benefits are just phenomenal, from the cardiovascular system, from the immune system, from the sleep enhancement, stress reduction. I mean, it goes on, and we can pick apart those different mechanisms. But I think that for also the detoxification. So just the act of sweating, whether you go to hot, because a lot of people are like, dude, okay, I can't afford a sauna. Like, I live with my family. What can I do? Hot yoga or sweating or a sauna blanket. Anything that gets your body temperature up is going to improve cardiovascular fitness, will help to excrete heavy metals, particularly lead, cadmium, mercury, things like that. The persistent organic pollutants that we're getting in our water and plastics, those are a little bit harder to get out. But the heavy metals that we're all exposed to and probably have high levels of readily get out in sweat, which is really cool. But yeah, I think, and I really attribute my quick recovery to COVID was due to our infrared sauna. Like, I knew I was getting sick. I didn't think it was SARS-CoV-2, but I was in there 3 times a day, and it was like a mild cold for me, a day and a half, and I was good to go. And other people that have saunas that have had COVID report similar feedback too. And I'm not saying that sauna cures COVID or anything like that, but there was some articles that were saying like, hey, why aren't we making this, sauna bathing like part of first line therapy? Why are we closing the saunas when we know that this virus is susceptible to heat, and so forth? And so it's really good for the immune system. One study that has actually shown, looking at athletes, where they measured various immune cells, macrophages, monocytes, T helper cells before the sauna and after, and there was massive, like, orders of magnitude higher activity and phagocytic capacity after the sauna. So it's a great way to support immune system health.
How hot does your sauna get?
So it gets so hot so basically, let me just give you the backstory. Okay. So the sauna that you have is a barrel sauna, which is great, right? And you have like probably a Harvia stove, which is like made by a Finnish company. So that's an electric stove. The challenge, and I love that, so you can turn it on, you can go in, whatever. So there's a rate limiting step to how hot the electric stoves can get, because the elements, the electric chips and things, they'll melt, right? So I built this, it's a classic Finnish sauna, and it has a wood fired stove. So it's this wood stove's like it's 18 by 36 inches. So it's pretty hot. And then on top of these rocks. And so you pour water on the rocks, and that's part of it, is the humidity that you get is really, really cool. But it gets so hot, to answer your question, it gets so hot. Like if I'm on the top bench and I pour water on the rocks, I have to put, and I don't really, because it's uncomfortable. I have to to breathe. I have to cover my hands and slowly breathe through my nose, or else it'll like burn.
Whoa.
And but that's like if my wife puts too many logs in, or if I'm like, okay, I'm feeling tired, or I really want to go to bed or whatever, I normally don't like to roll. So that's like 220, 230. So wow. Yeah. And it, so I can stay in most saunas for at least 25, 30 minutes. When it's that hot, I'm like 5 minutes and I'm like, I can't even go anymore. I got to go out. And then part of that too is not only just the heating, but the cooling down. So what's really interesting is when the body gets really hot, your body's trying to adapt and deal with the heat. So it's sending heat and blood away from the core, away from the periphery or towards the periphery. So you get a lot of vasodilation, and that endothelium of the blood vessel, the vasculature, is getting this exercise without moving your muscles. So a lot of people that have limited joint issues and inability to exercise, sauna is great because it's actually like working your heart and your cardiovascular system without you having to go exercise. So that's what's really great about that. But then the magic kind of happens when you cool down. So then when you take a cold plunge or you go take a shower, or a lot of people in Finland, they just go jump in a cold lake or a river. And so you're taking, when you get cold, your blood goes to the core. So it's like this elastic response. And so it's a great way to sort of stress test your cardiovascular system. But in that elasticity, it's not just one and done. So your blood vessels will get this, it's called this hunting response. It's really interesting. There's a bunch of data on this, which is how contrast therapy is so beneficial for we hear a lot about brown adipose tissue, and we can talk about that, but the cardiovascular system is due to this sort of rubber band like effect that goes in waves and cycles. So you go in the sauna, then you go in the ocean, for example, for like an hour afterwards, your cardiovascular system is going to like send blood out to the periphery and pull it back. And in so doing, it's just that recycling, and it's really good it's a good exercise for this organ called the endothelium. Endothelial dysfunction is linked with heart disease, hypertension, severe COVID outcomes. ED, endothelial dysfunction, is linked with ED, erectile dysfunction. So men that can't get it up and things like that, there's challenges there.
Yeah.
So yeah, to me, I mean, it's an amazing tool. It's part of what humans have been doing for hundreds of years. I mean, thousands probably. I mean, if you look at sweat lodges and, Native Americans used and all that. So this is, a consistent theme throughout cultures. And so I think it comes back to, what did humans do before the advent of technology that made them healthy? And part of it is the community and socialization of that. Yeah. So it's, a lot of people talk about heat shock proteins with saunas, and I think that's cool, but it's how do you measure heat shock? What is a heat shock protein? So I just like the fact that when you come out, your veins are popping like you just did a hard workout. And I've noticed, because I sold my infrared sauna to buy the stove for this one. So I went with no sauna for the first time in like 8 years for like 3 months as I was building this. And honestly, like I noticed the changes, like of a dearth of sauna bathing. And then once we started to go into it, I started to notice like my veins, not that I really care that much, but I'm like, you can see them more, they're more visible. And my wife and I, she notices her skin right away, and her patients, cause she's a chiropractor, were noticing right away, like your skin looks more vibrant. Like, what are you doing differently? And it was right after, months of, took a break from sauna and then starting it over again. So
it's amazing. Yeah. I think that the heat shock protein story is actually like very minor in terms of the benefit that we get from saunas compared to the vascular benefits that you just described. Yeah. And like, I feel like how heat shock engages these proteins, these like scaffolding proteins, for people who I've written about heat shock proteins, I'm sure you have as well, that they help protect they help guard against the misfolding of proteins. And when you look at proteopathies like Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, I mean, that is it's a very potentially useful mechanism, but it is at the end of the day, mechanistic speculation.
Right.
I think, because vascular dysfunction really, I think, is like one of the earliest problems, in terms of the etiology of these conditions. I think that's where the real money is when it comes to sitting in a sauna.
Totally.
And they've shown, University of Eastern Finland, right? Like all the risk reduction, such robust risk reduction with regular sauna use for stroke, for hypertension, for cardiovascular disease, all-cause mortality, and of course, dementia and Alzheimer's disease.
Which was huge.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the risk reduction for dementia and Alzheimer's was like in the mid 60%. So you're like, this is something that most people should be able to access, right? I mean, that's the downside, is like we're spending trillions of dollars, our government is, like, why public saunas would be amazing. I mean, imagine if you could go into a public sauna and if I know you travel, but like you go to different countries, like for example, I've been to South Korea and in other parts of the world, sauna bathing is like a thing. Like this is what people do and relax on the weekends, and there's bathhouses and all that. And we're so sort of in our boxes here, as Americans, where we don't like to talk to other people. We don't like to go, be in the same room. But I was in Chile actually last November of 2019, and there was just a bunch of people in the sauna. Like we went to multiple different saunas and different gyms and stuff like that, all throughout like Santiago and South Chile. And it was just part of the culture there. And we don't have that here. People say, I don't want to sit near someone else's sweat, or have these weird sort of germophobic, irrational fears about it, because you're killing microbes. You don't need to sanitize the sauna. Like the heat is going to do the job for you, But yeah, I mean, those studies that you mentioned, Jonas Lunkeman, I think it is his name. I mean, these are 26-year prospective studies where they've been tracking this cohort of individuals. And if you could encapsulate the benefits of a sauna into a pill, it would be the best selling drug there is. But you're like, oh, you have to go sit in the heat. People are like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'd rather just watch Netflix or whatever. I mean, it's just insane. But I think, so the cardiovascular benefits are huge. Heat shock proteins, big. Sweating, all of that. But for me, the deepened sleep is just another, like, sort of something we don't really talk about. But that to me, because I mean, as you know, circadian clock dysfunction, sleep issues, sleep disorder, breathing really sort of exacerbates all these different conditions. And what a great way without alcohol or sleeping pills. A lot of people have trouble sleeping is like, you will sleep like a baby. I've had many friends that since I finished the construction come over and they're like, they text me in the morning like, dude, I slept like a baby. Like I normally get up to pee 2 or 3 times and like every single person has slept amazingly. So that I think is huge because especially women around menopause, yeah, I'm sure you've gotten messages. For whatever reason, sleep can become a challenge for them.
What's the mechanism by which saunas help with sleep? Or is it just like anecdotally, you just find that it works?
Yeah, I'm not sure mechanistically. I think it's just, you're just relaxed, and if you do it at night, you're not on your phone, you're not on a screen. So I think there's some of that too. But I think it's just the relaxation, that parasympathetic, because it is stressful. It's like post-workout, you feel amazing. You feel so calm. There is some sort of, central nervous system stimulation, adrenaline, noradrenaline when you're actually in a sauna. This is transient. And then afterwards, you're really calm. So that's what I think mechanistically is going on, but maybe someone knows more.
I love it. Yeah. Infrared sauna. So I have a sauna, a barrel sauna on the roof, and I love it, but it doesn't quite reach the level of heat that like you're talking about.
Yeah.
Which, I'm kind of sad about. I feel like were I to rebuild a sauna in a new place, I would want to make sure that it was like a wood fired sauna. But my brother has a small infrared sauna from Clearlight. Actually, they've offered a discount for my listeners. If you guys go to my website, maxlugavere.com, and you hit store, you can go to Clearlight. There's like a link there or something like that. But I actually find it to be great. Like I love sitting in there because it's in his bedroom. It's like so small and compact. And he's got a TV. You could like watch stuff on YouTube while you're in the sauna.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So you prefer that over your barrel sauna?
I wouldn't say that I prefer it, but it's definitely it's a much more streamlined experience. And the other problem, so I'm sure you know this, but technically, like the way that the way saunas are built in Finland, you are supposed to sit at your feet should be at the level of the heat emission, so that the heat
heats everything.
Heats everything, right?
Yeah.
So in my barrel sauna, and I think this is probably how all barrel saunas are designed. It's a flaw in the design of barrel saunas, but if it's all you have access to, then it's great nonetheless. But mine, the top gets really hot. And it doesn't do as good of a job of heating the bottom. It takes a long time for it to get hot enough where your lower body, starts to heat up. The infrared sauna is different. The infrared sauna, the whole thing gets hot.
Yeah.
Because those heating elements are like, they're down by your feet. Yeah.
Yes. That's a good point. I haven't thought of that. That's a great point because a lot of people that have diabetes or prediabetes or high blood pressure have peripheral vascular disease.
There you go.
So they're not getting that. So yeah, you'd have to like put your feet up. If you like for you in your barrel, you have to raise your feet.
Yeah.
And then they can kind of burn a little bit, and you got to put them down.
Yeah, but it's impractical, and so I think that for that population, it might make more sense and also from just a space standpoint, to go the infrared route.
Totally.
Unless you're able to get like a legitimate sauna that and with all those considerations.
Yeah.
But I do think it's funny to note that the International Sauna Association, I believe it's a Finnish organization. They don't actually consider infrared saunas to be saunas.
Right.
They think it's a
Americanized,
an aberration of the term sauna, a misuse of the word sauna.
They're really sort of traditional. Like I've listened. There's the Sauna Times podcast I listened to, Glen Arba and a few other ones. And they do not like infrared saunas. And I interviewed him and he was just trashing infrared saunas. And I had to pause and be like, okay, look, they're a tool, right? I want people to get started and get some benefits, but they may not be the creme de creme, but they're still a tool. Like you can still get great benefit from them. So yeah, I never want people to it's like saying, oh, well, if you only exercise, only do high intensity exercise. Like you can, if all you can do is walk, then please, by all means, just walk or do push-ups, whatever. Like any exercise is good, but I'm with you. But what's interesting about that is if you look at where infrared saunas came from, studying in Japan, it's kind of the jargon is wow on therapy, and that's been used for diabetes, for other medical conditions. So they are medically validated. Like there is Western, hard science looking at in people that have peripheral vascular disease, for example, and other challenges. Like infrared has data, right? But that being said, there's this illusion because the heat is from infrared that they're magical and they get so. I just think maybe, but it's really just heat mediated at the end of the day, um, as far as I understand it. So as long as you can get it pretty hot, and like you said, if you can get your whole body hot, then that's awesome.
Yeah. Do you have any concerns about like EMFs, anything like that? Is that at all on your radar? Or?
A little bit, but most of these infrared sauna companies have tested for that and they have low EMF output and everything. So, but what I do have a consideration for is in public saunas, people going in with their shoes, they're wearing their cologne and stuff like this. Like you have some people that they'll go to the gym before they work out, they'll walk into the sauna with their shoes on. And so poor ventilation can be a major problem. So there's if you want to nerd out on it, I doubt anyone would want to actually do this, but there's all this research on how to properly vent your sauna. And because you need that airflow. And what can happen is, especially if you have a wood fired stove, it can suck out a lot of the oxygen. So you can get high levels of CO2 and
Oh,
people
wow.
can feel lightheaded and dizzy and all that. So venting a sauna, and there's a lot of like physicists who have been looking at this and how air circulates. And what's cool about the barrel is the heat comes up and then it comes back down in the circular effect. But the venting is really important. So if you just go to a gym sauna that's not vented properly, you can have mold and challenges there. And again, I don't want to discourage people from going to the sauna. It's probably better than nothing, but just understand that like you can get super nuanced with venting and all
Yeah.
that.
Did you follow a guide when building yours?
Yeah. So this guy, Glen Arba, who's been doing this for like 35 years, like he's been doing traditional Finnish saunas. I can't remember his backstory. He was working in Europe and then went to Finland to do something and was exposed to sauna therapy there, came back. And in the upper Midwest and parts of like Michigan and Minnesota, there's a lot of Finnish, Norwegian type, folks there, Scandinavian countries, and it's huge. So that you'll see, there's all these different lakes. I've never been to Minnesota, but it's a huge thing. So anyway, he has this ebook. It was $25, and it gave me a guide as to like, there was some customization that I did along the way. And in there was a big section on his website is good too on venting and how to properly vent. And it's interesting because my daughter, who's only 8, she'll go in there with us, but on the lower bench, and she has a little vent that she can use. But it's cool. It's kind of like on a cold day, when the wind is blowing, it feels cooler. But so when it's hot from the stove and you vent it, it actually feels hotter because you have more, air coming in and it's circulating and all that. So yeah, it's good. And that's what I worry about. The only downside to the infrared at home is you can create a mold issue in your home inadvertently. So I would encourage people, like if they have an infrared in their bedroom, make sure that you're opening up a window or a door and airing things out, because we noticed that in our master bedroom when we had the infrared, we got it in 2016. All of a sudden there was these little speckles of mold randomly appearing, and we would open the door, my wife and I, and like all the steam comes out, and we didn't think to crack the window. Like maybe after a month, we were like, oh, maybe we should start cracking the window. But that you got like mold can be very problematic for your health. So
Wow. Super interesting. Where are you living these days?
Seattle.
You're in Seattle.
Yeah.
Doesn't it get gloomy up there?
You know what? I mean,
I've never been, but
you got to come up, man. If you
yeah.
need to interview someone, and we'll sauna and I'll take you through the experience. But the weather has changed since I was a kid. Like it's definitely like we've had an amazing March. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting. I do like it. I would say that the COVID paranoia up there, I mean, you see so many people double and triple masking with face shields,
Oof.
walking their dog. And it's just like, I wish I could just say to them, like, the risk of outdoor transmission is like 1 in 3,000, man. Like, just breathe some air. Like, the stress has to like manifest in other ways unintendedly. So,
Yeah, I definitely feel sad inside when I see people walking outside by themselves
right.
with even one mask on.
Yeah.
And I dutifully will wear a mask indoors. I'm part of society, right? Like I want to be a team player in this. And, I think the sooner we can get back to normal, the better. But yeah, it is very sad, I think, when you see people that have just been so overcome by the fear and the panic porn pervaded by the media. And, it's just not, I wish there was another way. I was in San Francisco recently with a friend, and we took a walk, and he told me that I should probably put a mask on because people are very vocal. They're a lot more vocal there, and they'll say something to you.
Shame you, yeah.
They'll shame you. Yeah. And I was like, all right.
So you just went with it and said, fine. Whatever.
Yeah. I just went with it. I mean, I pick my battles, and
Right.
but I mean, were I not with my friend, I probably wouldn't have worn a mask. But I did because, he just,
It's his
I was
area.
a stranger in a strange land. It was his neighborhood. And so I was like, okay, fine. In LA, I never wear a mask outside.
Right.
Yeah.
I noticed that, so I've spent some time in Venice this morning and all that. And a lot of people that are exercising outdoor, thankfully, are not wearing masks out here. And I know that might irritate some of your listeners, but again, the risk of outdoor transmission, there's been many scientists that have looked at this, very, very low. So whereas the risk of always wearing a mask, I mean, these masks, they're not side effect free. I mean, especially these surgical face coverings, they have a lot of plastic and chemicals and things like that, where if you're breathing that all the time, I mean, what's the unintended harm of constantly inhaling that? So yeah, but I've noticed, the mask culture is definitely, there's pockets of it. And I would say that San Francisco and Seattle are very similar because the tech areas, it seems like whether it's an obedience thing or looking at the studies or whatever, but yeah, I found that out here, even elderly people are on the beach just running with no mask. And that gives me some hope, because it's like, okay, you should be enjoying, as long as you're spaced out, like not in a race with thousands of people, like you're probably good, to enjoy the fresh air.
100%. I find that the one major difference in me, in my own physiology when I'm wearing a mask, is that I tend to breathe less out of my nose and more out of my mouth. I become a mouth breather
Same.
when I'm wearing a mask
Mhm.
because of the pressure that it puts on the bridge of your nose.
Yep. I've noticed that a lot too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not a joke. Like, I become a mouth breather when the mask is on. And we know that that's not, I mean, why is that not good for us? By the way, I should also mention that I've started, a couple of years ago, I taped my mouth for the first time because of you.
Nice.
And I fell off the wagon, and I've been doing it since, like recently, over the past couple of months, I've been taping my mouth, and I'm like hooked.
Dude, it's so
when I
amazing.
sleep. Yeah.
Yeah. So what got you off? You just like lost it one day and then you said, okay, I'll just.
Well, I discovered, I started, which, I don't know if you do this, but I've been using nasal strips.
Oh, cool.
Like Breathe Right strip,
Yep.
not Breathe Right strips. I don't
cheaper
like
ones?
those as much. I get the CVS ones. They don't leave a residue on my nose. And so I use those. So they really open up your nasal passageways, your nasal airways. And then because I just feel so good breathing out of my nose with those things on, I've been taping my mouth, and it's just great, man. It's like definitely like a marked difference in my sleep quality, which was
huge.
already good,
Right.
but
It's next level.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people think that you're kidding or joking when you say you tape your mouth because they're like, well, why would I want to do that? But it is catching on. Thankfully, I think more and more people are catching on to it. But yeah, I mean, just the physiology of it, I'm sure. Have you had Mark Behena on yet?
no.
Okay, I'll link you up with him. But so he's a dentist in the San Francisco Bay Area. I interviewed him in 2015, and he was the one that turned me on to it. So the idea is when you're breathing through your mouth while you're sleeping, you go through many periods of paralysis as your body is repairing. So neurologically, you're not sending signals to your tongue, and then so your tongue will collapse on your airway, and you'll have hypoxic events. And those are called apneas. And some people have more apneas, or depending upon their neck size and how much body fat they have and all of that. And so, mouth taping can help sort of overcome that. But I'm with you. I do the cheap, the nose tape, what the Breathe Right knockoffs, CVS and Walgreens, they all have a knockoff version. I do worry. I started to worry about. I'm doing this all the time, right? All this adhesive. Like, what is this stuff doing to me? I kind of worry about that, but I just rinse my face off in the morning and try not to sweat it. But yeah, it's completely changed my life. I mean, every night I do it, I usually have at least 3 to 4 like vivid dreams I can recall and write down. If I miss it, like last night, sleep wasn't very good. Traveling in different place and all that.
Yeah, of course.
But anyway, it's a game changer, and especially for women too as they age. So Dr. Brahena has shared with me that women, when they go through menopause, the estrogen affects sort of the collagen production in their airway, and that can exacerbate sleep disordered breathing. So we hear about sleep apnea. We hear about like diabetes and insulin resistance. So sleep disordered breathing is on the sleep apnea spectrum. So a lot of people have some form of sleep disordered breathing and they don't know it. And so if they are doing that, I mean, it's linked with hyperleptinemia and elevated levels of leptin, stress, oxidative stress, all of this. Even more severe outcomes for COVID. One study showed that sleep apnea was linked with poor COVID.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, this is something people should do. And I think it starts, like you said, during the day. So just, you can mouth tape during, you're watching a movie or reading a book, just try during the day. And then it's easier to actually get into the habit of doing it at night once you're more comfortable with breathing through your nose during the day.
Didn't you cause a stir a couple years back by showing a picture on Instagram of you taping your kids' mouths?
Yeah. People there were so many.
They were like, you child abuser.
Yeah. I'm going to report you and all this. And, I've shared many times the before and after pictures. So I started she's 8 years old. I started mouth taping her when she was 4. And so there was all these irrational responses of, what if she throws up? What if she does this and all that? And my daughter's never thrown up while she's sleeping, right? So I wasn't too worried about that. And she slept in our bed. So that was the other thing. It's like, she's right. I'm going to hear her like vomiting if she does vomit, but it changed for the better, the shape of her mouth and her face.
Wow.
And she's now no longer a mouth breather. So because I got to it early, why wait until they're 17? And, because when you and I were growing up, the solution to our small mouths was like, just rip out all the teeth, right? And give kids headgear and expand the mouth. And now the thinking is like, well, just get kids to breathe properly and get their tongue in the right position, and the face will shape itself like nature had intended. And so we got for her the myo brace, which is a way to just reinforce tongue position and entrain nasal breathing. But she had already been mouth taping, and so she may never have to have braces or anything like that. Whereas a lot of the kids that she goes to school with and friends, their teeth are all over the place, and they have headgear and braces and like all these interventions. And we started early with this horrific mouth taping therapy that was abusive. And but people just get super emotional and charged, and
anyway. Especially out of context when they see like just a photo that looks crazy on their Explore feed. They come over and they leave hate. What's the kind of tape that people can use? I mean, I just go on Amazon and I look for mouth tape, and there's like, you can find really cheap versions, but what is that? What's the name of that like porous tape?
Yeah, the 3M micropore tape.
Is that what it is? Yeah. You can just find that. You can find that anywhere.
Most drugstores. I mean, even Canada, I found it in South Korea. Yeah. So it's at most drugstores. It is expensive. It's like $9. So I'm sure you can find deals like buy 3, get 1 free or whatever on Amazon. But yeah, most CVS, Walgreens, Rite Aids, they have it. But you can use any. I mean, in a pinch, I've used a Band-Aid. Like you just need a little something right there to sort of discourage your mouth from hanging out wide open.
Yeah. Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed that, you're gonna love this.
REM sleep has a tendency to occur in the latter part of the night. That's where the bulk of your REM sleep is. You have a little bit in each cycle, but the back half is where you get the most of it. That's really arguably one of the deepest stages of sleep. In order to pull the brain out of that for, wake up for your day, when it is the most likely stage you're gonna be in, you need something that's got some giddy up in it. And cortisol and adrenaline are those things.